Hello, BookTube. It's Friday, and that means Friday Reads, where we talk about the books that are on our radar, that are immediately coming up, that maybe have just recently finished, maybe that we're working on at the moment. I love those videos. I eagerly look forward to them, even if there hasn't been much turnover. Plenty of you have plenty of things going on in your life. So you make a Friday Reads video in which the landscape has not that much changed. I still love hearing about it. It's still a check-in of a kind that I think is very helpful, very healthy. And I want to do a Friday Reads myself today. I've got a few books to show you. Some of them I have not read yet. Some of them I have read and will be rereading. And I've been struggling with technology, amazingly enough. I've been struggling with how to show you these. I think I've found a machine that will work without failing. But the nice thing about a Friday Reads video is that if the machinery completely stops working, 10 minutes in, which may or may not have happened several times today or several hundred times, the mind wanders, I can just redo things. You know, you can't redo a mail haul or an interview, really, but you can redo one of these things. So the first one we're doing is a DK guide. I've shown you many, many DK guides. They're the big, oversized, beautifully done visual guides to anything. And this is their new edition of the DK Guide to Birds. I have two, I think, and this one is new. It's got lots and lots of new photos, lots and lots of new graphics. Then we have a comic book omnibus volume of a run on a comic that I didn't particularly enjoy. And sometimes you get more out of a run that you didn't enjoy if you read it all at once in as a book instead of individual issues. There's a lot that can go into it. You buy an individual issue for $4. If it isn't really good on its own as an individual issue, if it's mainly meaning to be just a bridging chapter between two other chapters in the story, but you've paid $4 for it, that's gonna hurt your appreciation of it. So there's a big, huge omnibus. You'll be probably seeing it on Michael K. Vaughan's channel. It's Captain America Lives. It's a run on Captain America by Ed Brubaker. There's a beautiful Alex Ross cover. The frustrating thing for me about the issues in here, this is a run on Captain America that took place after the famous issue in which Captain America, handcuffed and being led away by police, is shot to death at point-blank range in public on camera by a brainwashed Sharon Carter, who walks up to him and unloads a revolver into his stomach. In other words, as graphic and unambiguous a death as any comic book hero has ever had. No chance that the character is alive. None whatsoever. But in Marvel, no one's ever dead, except Uncle Ben. So I used to say Uncle Ben and Bucky, but of course Bucky is alive. Bucky came back. I used to say that all the time, but now it's just Uncle Ben. And don't think that hasn't crossed the mind of many a Marvel writer. If Jor-El, Superman's father, could come back from the dead, then Uncle Ben can come back from the dead, probably as a villain. Let's not even think about it. If it's already happened, please don't tell me about it. One of the frustrations that I had of these issues, this omnibus starts off with the tortuously convoluted way to bring Captain America back to life, bring him back into the world, despite the fact that he was shot to death at point-blank range. It's not as convoluted as the method that Kevin Smith came up with to bring Green Arrow back to life, but it's pretty convoluted, pretty ridiculously so. There are many ways that it doesn't work. Ed Brubaker has lots and lots of fans as a writer. He's never done it for me as a writer. I just don't see... There's a lot of tough guy posturing, but I see gaping plot holes in most of what he does. But the main frustration for me for a lot of these issues is that they're drawn by an artist named Steve Epting, who did one of my favorite runs on the Avengers decades before these issues came out. And in these issues, his artwork is virtually unrecognizable. It's so muted and gritty and gloomy and dark that it was weird to see his name on the credits. I'm hoping that reading the omnibus all at once will give me a better appreciation. Then this next one is something I think we've seen on this channel before. I will be rereading it. I'll be reading the finished copy. This is by Ira Rutkow, and it is Empire of the Scalpel, A History of Surgery. going all the way back, as you can tell from the cover, right? That bottom tool is several thousand years old. Surgeries were still being done. The ancient Egyptians were doing surgeries to remove cataracts. No small thing. Of course, surgery as an art, or as a practice anyway, existed for thousands of years before the essential concomitant tools that made it bearable. The microscopic examination of the wound so that you know what you're doing, and also anesthesia. Surgery existed long before either one of those two things, and this is all about that. It's gruesome reading, but really good. I can't wait to sort of get a second opinion on it with the finished copy. Then we have a book. This is by Philip Gorski and Samuel Perry, and it's called The Flag and the Cross: White Christian Nationalism and the Threat to American Democracy. This is a study of just what it says on the cover. I've read extensively on this subject from other books about the Proud Boys, about the Oath Keepers and the Three Percenters, and none of those organizations, all of which are bent on the destruction of this country, all of those organizations are bent on putting Donald Trump in power as an unelected, military-backed dictator and simply ending America as a participatory democracy. No matter what they tell you otherwise, no matter what their dumb, useful idiots might say, the core leadership of those kinds of white Christian nationalist groups, all want that. They want the end of America. And they are all, it's not an item that usually makes it into the press, but they are all intensely religious. Mainly because at heart they are intensely sexist and racist. And they draw their justification for those things from the Bible. A great number of them, there's a book coming out on this later this year, a great number of them are also flat earthers, also drawn from the Bible, because the Bible's portrait of the world is very clearly that of a flat earth. These two authors, from what I can learn from this book, they dig into the deep roots and also get pretty far into the organizations. I'm thinking it was probably a dangerous book to research. These are clear and present dangers to the United States, to every single person who lives in this country who's not a member of these groups. So it'll be fascinating but disturbing to read. Fortunately, I'm a little bit inoculated because I've read a lot of books on the subject. I can't wait to see how good this one is. This next one I have read, and it's loathsome, absolutely loathsome. It's One Damn Thing After Another by William Barr, ex-President Donald Trump's lickspittle Attorney General. Of all of the Trump creatures, only Mike Pompeo is more innately violent than William Barr. Don't be fooled by the deputy dog exterior. This is a person who well, let's leave that aside and talk about the book. The book is yet another example of a Trump cash grab, where all of these creatures who were in his orbit and were willing to subvert any kind of democracy in order to do what he wants, willing to commit any kind of atrocity, from jailing children on concrete floors to gassing protesters in order to have a Bible-waving photo op. These goons were willing to do that because it put them in conjunction with power, even if the power was someone who, in this book and in all the other Trump cash grabs, they are willing to portray as an unhinged lunatic. The portrait of Trump in this book is that of an unhinged lunatic. And you may have seen, if you're unlucky, if you watch as much cable news as I do, that William Barr is doing as much of the publicity circuit for this book as he possibly can. There's a great deal of revulsion. It encourages me to see the great deal of revulsion that even ratings-hungry news organizations feel towards this kind of phenomenon, where someone, a creature of Trump, is perfectly willing to subvert American democracy for years, and then they try to villainize him in order to make a quick buck with a book. For all I know, it's working. For all I know, Barr is the fifth or sixth Trump creature to make $1 million off a book. I read it because I consider it my duty to read these things in the run-up to 2024. And it's loathsome. Absolutely loathsome. This is a violent, angry man who not in any particle of his being believes in democracy, and who would very much like to see anyone who disagrees with him, and I mean about anything, the color of the curtains in the living room, jailed and beaten. he's not as violent as Mike Pompeo, but he's pretty close. And that made it a loathsome, soiling reading experience. So those are parts of Friday Read too, right? Friday Reads isn't just walks in the park with daisies. This next one is by Ellery Lloyd. I don't think I know this author. This is a thriller called The Club. Everyone's dying to join. It's about a series of, you can see Reese's Book Club. I guess Reese Witherspoon is a kind of a social media power in the book world. Like Oprah. She picks a book and has a book club. And it, I guess, is a huge financial boon to the author if they get picked for Reese's Book Club. I'll have to research that, figure out what the details are. That might be worth a column. But this is a story about a series of extremely elite getaways for celebrities. Places where they're a long way away from surveillance of any kind. They're a long way from paparazzis or their fans, where they get to let their hair down and be who they are. And in the course of describing that world, a murder happens. And lots of other skullduggery happens as well. And you've got a necessarily limited cast of suspects. I think this will be good, sudsy fun. Certainly I will be interested to know if Ellery Lloyd displays any knowledge of the fact that this is a real phenomenon. There are real places like this that celebrities know and use for a whole bunch of reasons, and with no record whatsoever kept. I mean, I don't know that it's a nefarious string of places with, cloaked and mysterious chaperones involved, but there are very much what one celebrity who has just been in a very successful movie refers to as safe houses. A lot of celebrities have referred to them along a variation of a safe house. Places you can go where, other people in your profession have vetted the owners, where you're not near anyone in any way, so that if, for instance, you have a very bankable Hollywood career as a rom-com lead, you can go to one of these places and no one will know that you're there. No one will know who else is there. And no one will be anywhere around when you French kiss your boyfriend. Having kept that completely out of the public eye. No one will be around to maybe surreptitiously take pictures of you doing hash or injecting cocaine or whatever. You can go there and do what you want. That a network of those kinds of quote unquote safe spaces really does exist. And I wonder how much the author knows about that, or if this is just a case of serendipity. Then we have an economics book. I'm going to do my best with it. It's more David Murphy's territory than mine, but I'm going to do my best with it. This is by Peter Zeihan, Zeihan. Again, I don't know anything about the author. Probably David knows a lot about him, has read his graduate papers and whatnot. This is The End of the World is Just the Beginning. Mapping the Collapse of Globalization. The author points out in this book that the COVID-19 pandemic really woke up the world to the extent of globalization and made a lot of the world repulse from that state of affairs. The author's point is that American superpower might is the thing that made globalization possible. And that if you remove that, you remove globalization, it starts to break down right away. And I don't know what to think about that. I'll have to see what kind of an argument the author makes. Well, I have to say, not on the subject of this book, I have to say, well, maybe it is on the subject of this book, since nothing of this little iPad was made in America. But I have to say, the technology is working fairly well. I'm kind of pleased with this. This is an iPad mini, so I'm not negotiating with this thing to make sure I don't accidentally manipulate the screen. I'm not trying to grip it by the edge so I don't touch the screen. Instead, I can just palm it. I can hold it in my hand. Pretty good. I think I might stick with this for a bit. This next one is fantasy. Epic fantasy. There's an author I really, really like. I strongly recommend him. This is The Martyr by Anthony Ryan. And this is the sequel to The Pariah, which came out last year. A new fantasy series that is interesting and different. This author's Raven... I don't remember Raven's Call or Raven's Claw or Raven's Beak or Raven's Gizzard or something like that. I don't remember the dumb name of it, but his previous series of fantasy novels was fantastic. Really, really intelligent. The type of thing where you start one of his books and you immediately know that this fantasy author is not just regurgitating stuff. You can make a very good living by just regurgitating stuff, but he doesn't do it. Instead, he's thinking. It reminded me, actually, of John Marco, The Jackal of Nar, that series of books, military fantasy, which I don't think John Marco those books are in print anymore. But when you started those books, you very much got the sense that this was an author who had thought about everything a lot more than you need to sell one of these books if you've got a pretty cover. And this is true with this book too. There's lots and lots of subplots, but it centers around a figure who has prophetic visions, and that is a neat trick, especially since, unlike in a lot of fantasy series, you're not 100% sure whether those visions are right or ever will be right. It's I don't want to spoil too much, and there's not much of a way to talk about these things without spoiling, especially the second one. But find Pariah. Pariah might be in paperback by now, or it's just about to come to paperback, so maybe the hardcover will be 50 cents on eBay or something like that. Give it a try. No need to go back to the older books. I've shown you a couple of the older books here, but there's no reason to go back to those. You can just start with the Pariah. You can't start with this one, I don't think. You could try it, but I don't think you can, and there's no reason to. What I'm trying to say is I'm pretty sure that there are cheap copies of Pariah out there, and if you don't like shopping online, I bet it's due for a paperback to coincide with the hardcover release of this book, which means you could get a nice trade paperback of it at your bookstore for $15. Then this next one, I'm going to try not to lecture. If I could succeed in not lecturing for 45 minutes about Bill Barr, a truly evil thug, who I guess is thinking that he can thread this needle, that he can write a book that calls Trump an unhinged maniac and still think he will be spared because he was an official in the first Trump administration. If I could refrain from lecturing you for 45 minutes about that book, then I can certainly refrain from lecturing you about this one. I will merely point out it is extremely intelligent. It is well worth your time if you're interested in the subject. This is by Rob Percival, and it's called The Meat Paradox. The title is The Future of Meat. The subtitle alludes to the future of meat, and what the author wants to discuss here is ethical meat consumption. I don't want to block the bean, but I also don't want to upset the technology. They're both behaving well. The author here wants to talk about ethical meat consumption, and that's a hill too far. That won't work. There's no such thing. So you're hampered out of the starting gate right there. But it's fascinating to watch what the author does with this subject. I'm very much looking forward to rereading this and taking lots of notes and getting it under my belt. Ultimately, it fails because there's only one ultimate answer. This author goes on and on. He makes the point over and over again. I don't know quite how often I'll have to reread it with my critical glasses on, but he makes the point over and over again that humans need protein. They need all sorts of nutrients. So no, no, Seymour, that doesn't work. You do not need to eat sentient beings. You do not need to eat meat in order to live. That is simply false. That is simply false. You might have evolved to eat meat, but you don't need to. Humans aren't subject to evolution anymore. They have superseded it and create the world. So the basic paradox here is not a paradox. It's not a paradox. It's the meat solution. Stop eating meat. That's it. Stop eating it. Stop factory farming it. Stop torturing all these people who have a sense of humor and a personality and a sense of fellowship and bad days and good days and compassion for members outside their own species as well as their own species. Just stop doing it. You have to stop doing it. We have to stop doing it for all of the ethical reasons, but also for all of the practical reasons. These animals are kept in 2x4 cages, chain link fences underneath them. They never feel anything like comfort. They can't even turn around. If they have an itch on their hind part, they can't scratch it. They urinate and defecate through the chain link onto the animal below them. The cages are stacked and stacked. When you live like that, and you've lived like that all your life, you were born into that world, you're never going to see the outside world except maybe through the doorway of a truck on your way to be executed. You're going to be a breeding ground for disease, which is why these animals are pumped full of antibiotics and steroids from the minute they're born. And to say nothing of how much they absorb before they're born from their parents and from their mother who also absorbed it. It's not just a question of ethics. It's also that this is sickening the whole world. But I said I wouldn't lecture. It's a very good book on that subject. Oh, here can be over here again because you won't be blocking her face. It's a very good book on that subject. So if you're interested in that subject, I recommend it. All right, then this next one, it's a novel. It's a strong recommend. This is Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. I will have a lot more to say about this novel, a lot more. I want to reread it at least once. But I can report to you, and you can take my report more to heart than anybody else's report, right? Let's keep that in mind. So we're talking about new releases. We're talking about my bailiwick. I can report that this novel achieves something that very few novelists manage. It completely avoids the sophomore slump. That universally feared bugaboo where an author comes storming out of the gate with a great debut, and everybody praises it, in this case Shuggie Bain, and then writes a second novel that is drastically worse, less, something that is either obviously a scraped together earlier draft because most novelists don't have more than one great novel in them, or was written at speed because there's a deadline, because you were given a 3-book contract, so you only have a certain amount of time to produce that second book. Inspiration or no inspiration. Those factors give rise to the dreaded sophomore slump, where a second book is terrible, or at least drastically worse than the first book. Not so here. This is an intensely predictable book. I don't think after the first 30 pages, I don't think there's anything in this book that you won't be able to see coming. Literally nothing. Even some lines of dialogue. But it's still beautiful. This author's rhetorical power is obviously a feature and not a bug. Obviously, Shuggie Bain was not a fluke. So if you want to be absolutely swept away, the way you were with Shuggie Bain, which was praised by everybody, and justly so, well, not quite everybody. There were a couple of booktubers who didn't like it. They didn't like the praise that it got. He's got away with sentences, I guess. But does he have to have white skin? I mean, the author has white skin, and I'm a racist. So anyway, I'm not going to lecture about meat or Bill Barr. I'm certainly not going to lecture about that. All I can say is Young Mungo is a strong recommend. I can't wait to reread it. Then we have a historical novel. I think I showed you a copy of this. But I've got all these ebooks, so it was more convenient to just use it all on the iPad rather than to go hunting for them. This is a Napoleonic seafaring adventure. It's Captain Gray's Gambit by J.H. Gellertner. This is a second adventure of Captain Gray that he does, and hopefully he'll have many, many more. The author is fairly young and amazing. That's all the more amazing when you read these books because they're very well done, and they're not long. So if you're in the mood for a historical adventure, a nautical adventure, a Napoleonic seafaring adventure, something that knows enough to spice up the historical texture and background scenes with action sequences, if you're in the mood for something like that and you're thinking there aren't enough of these coming out, well, this series is only 2 books old and well worth your time. So you can get into the ground level. And then we'll finish up with this last one. This last one is not a new release. It's on my Friday reads because I do a lot of reading. I don't just read new releases. They're mostly what I read, but I also reread all kinds of things and even read older things. So they aren't rereads. They're old, but I haven't never got to them. It does happen. This is a reread. To put it mildly, I have read this so many times. But I'm going to read it again anyway, just for the fun of it, because it's been a long time. It's probably been 20 years. This is Flashing Swords, #1. These were high fantasy anthologies put together by Lynn Carter. And I was put in mind of this one by FFS, by February Fantasy Stories, a booktube event that I was part of in February that got me really, I was reading a whole bunch of fantasy stories and it got me in mind of all the others out there that I want to read or reread. So I'm going to be rereading, there's the Frank Frazetta cover, I'm going to be rereading Flashing Swords #1, which is 4 novellas, 4 high fantasy, epic fantasy novellas. Mostly sword and sorcery, lots and lots of dark stuff here. I seem to recall the Fritz Leiber one being the best, but you never know. It's been a long time. My sensibilities as a reader have changed, so I'm looking forward to re-exploring this very much so. And then who knows, maybe Flashing Swords 2 for next Friday. But that's it. That is our Friday reads for today, and the technology worked fairly well. I am pleased. That is good. So I'm going to wrap this up while I'm ahead of the game, and I look forward to seeing your Friday reads if you have a BookTube channel. But if not, feel free to tell me in the comments what is on your bookish radar right now. I'm genuinely curious to know with everybody, and I will wrap this up. We'll do another Friday reads next week. Thank you, BookTube.